of the WSESD board on December 16th will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and the agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email or by text. We will do our very best to reconnect you. Nevertheless, this meeting will continue as posted. Regarding the consent agenda, if any board member feels that an item on the consent agenda warrants discussion, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be set aside for discussion. In this way, the consent agenda will be approved in one motion. That request should be made now or before the vote on the consent agenda. Tim Maceo.
I have 2 amendments to make to the minutes.
Okay.
So the first one, Jocelyn and I discussed the minutes and whether or not to include the written notes for the legislative update that we started last meeting. And I defer to Jocelyn that there was sufficient discussion of the document to warrant inclusion in the minutes.
Okay,
So my recommendation is to include that document in the minutes.
okay, and that would be a link in the minutes of the last board meeting. Okay?
Yes, and they've already been sent to Matt.
I'm sorry?
Matt already has them.
We all have them. We all have those notes. We all received them. And does that, I'm looking around the room, does that meet with board approval to include that in the minutes? Okay, so be it. Included in the minutes. All right, and you have a second amendment to the agenda.
I'd like to amend the note in the draft minutes that read, quote, TM inquired about behavioral data. I believe a better summary of that discussion would be, quote, TM noted that one of the minimum data reporting requirements in the equity quality standards documents was suspension rates, which are currently absent from board reports. And Mr. Spino said that they would be forthcoming.
Okay, and that is on page 3 of the minutes. TM inquired about behavioral data. To expand that out, does that meet with board approval?
It does not.
It does not. Okay, Matt. Shipley.
Yeah, so I, as the clerk, I do my best to summarize, a close approximation to what happened in good faith to give a general sense about the discussion. I think if there are things that are important to the board, particularly as it pertains to follow-up from administration, that needs to be a motion, it needs to be voted on, and we'll proceed with the will of the board. I don't particularly, when I went through a recent training when I became the clerk, the recommendation in that training was that the notes actually should not include any discussion. It should only include the agenda and the motions. I will find myself, I think it'll impede our ability to function effectively as a board if we have belabored discussions about semantics and words. If there are direct quotes that a board member would like or a member of the community would like embedded, I'm happy to do a direct quote. But when it comes to interpretations, I am less inclined to have larger discussions about that.
I would like to add my experience as a community member, sitting in a board meeting when David Scholes was chair. And I spoke to him afterwards about the minutes, because the way they were written, discussion ensued. And he told me to check Robert's Rules of Order. And sure enough, Robert's Rules of Order says discussion ensued. And that what should be in the minutes is the motion. So, and again, a motion is not an individual's motion, but it's the motion of the board. Jessica, I saw your hand.
Oh, I was going to say, I previously served as a clerk on a representative town meeting in Connecticut, and it was the same. We only had to put in the motions.
Right.
And
right.
So that
I do have concerns as I look at the minutes and I think about what other people have said in a board meeting, and I'm concerned that the minutes will become unwieldy. And so I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'd like to keep this to the board. Jody, yes.
I just want to ask if people would speak up, because especially the people with their backstories,
Yes,
we
yes.
can't hear.
Okay. So, right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody, thank you. So at this point, an amendment has been presented, and in order to proceed, is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Is there a motion to proceed?
Is there a motion regarding the amendment? Because amendments,
Well, I made
if,
the motion to amend the minutes.
okay, you've made a motion to amend the minutes. All right, and,
Point of order.
yes,
So I believe the process is that we as a board would pull minutes from the consent agenda. And then once they're pulled, then we would consider action. But
okay,
if we have not done that, then we proceed as is.
so I appreciate what you just said. We went through the consent agenda. There's an amendment to the minutes, and in effect, the minutes have been pulled from the consent agenda.
Yep.
The minutes are pulled from the consent agenda based upon, it wasn't formally said, but based upon what we're doing right now, they've been pulled from the consent agenda. And any amendments at this point, I think, it's a motion. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that I'm unfamiliar with this process because I feel like we are, trying to do something in order to then put it back in consent agenda, when the idea of consent agenda is that it creates a quick, easy process. This doesn't seem easy or quick. And so I think but I appreciate that there has been a motion, and I think we should move forward with it.
Okay, all right. There's a motion. Is it seconded?
I'll second it.
You're gonna second it, okay. And so the motion is to amend the minutes of December 9, as stated by the board member. And any further discussion? All right, so for the purpose of clarity, can we hear the motion, please?
Tim Maciel, motion to amend the minutes of 12-9 as stated by Tim Maciel.
Okay. All right, with no further discussion, bring it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented by Tim Maciel, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and any opposed, please indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
Nay. Any abstentions? You're
I don't
abst-
remember the conversation in detail.
Okay, so we have one abstention, we have one nay, and the remaining are ayes. All right.
No, no.
No, I'm sorry.
One aye, one abstention, and the remaining are nays.
Nays, that's right. Thank you very much. Thank you for clarity on that one. So the motion fails. Okay, any amendments to the agenda as it exists? All right, so a couple of announcements. I realize this is December 16, and a much needed break is around the corner. And this is the only opportunity that the WSESD has to extend appreciation to every student, to every staff member, to custodians, to administration. Thank you for your dedication and your hard work. Enjoy your time with family and friends, but most especially spend time with yourself for, rest and restorative time. I also would like to thank the many individuals who have made tonight possible. Ruby McAdoo, for reaching out to our two state senators, Senator Wendy Harrison and Senator Nader Hashim. Thank you, Ruby. I'd like to thank on the record Ricky Ather, Sean McLaughlin, Jamie Danzer, Jesse Cudworth. I'd like to thank Julio, and I don't know Julio's last name, but the whole configuration of this space is due to their hard work and my coming in and saying, ooh, maybe we could change it a little bit and see how it works. Nancy Weiss, I'd like to thank you for allowing us to take over your space. Peter, thank you, BCTV, for always being here for you. And I'd like to thank two people who make the magic happen, and that is Mo Hart and Bethany Bouchard. Okay, so, and if I've left anyone out, forgive me. Reminder, our next meeting is January 13, 2026 at the Green Street School. And that is when a second draft of the budget will be presented with ample time for the community to comment on the budget. Tonight we're going to begin with Frank Rucker, and I know we're running a little behind schedule. And Frank Rucker is going to be presenting the first comprehensive draft of the budget. And we will end that promptly at about 6:55. We're going to take a short break, and then we will follow with discussion with our guests, our two state senators. And if we have to cut the discussion short in terms of the budget, please be assured there will be copious time on January 13 to address questions and concerns. So I turn it over to Frank Rucker. Thank you.
Yeah. And did you folks get a copy?
We have one more sharing. Are there extras?
Yeah, there's an extra if you'd like. Yeah. I was going to provide a little overview, and then Frank will dig into the details for us.
Can I ask, can everyone hear over here? Yes, you can hear. Okay, thank you.
Frank and I have worked very closely with our administrators to bring you this first draft of our SD budget. We are pleased that it's under a 3% increase, currently at a 2.6% increase. This budget does represent a reduction of 9 positions through our work with our principals and directors and curriculum and special ed folks. If you remember last year, we presented a budget with a reduction of 10 positions. The year prior to that, an additional 10 positions. So in a 3-year period, we've reduced this budget for approximately 30 positions, 29 positions. And, that is related to the COVID pandemic and receiving ESSER funding, federal funding, millions of dollars to help with recovery. And you all know we invested in our buildings, in the safety of our buildings. We also invested in new positions to offer more support for our students who were coming off a worldwide pandemic. So that was a blessing, but also presented a bit of a burden as well, knowing that as we created more resources to help with recovery, that in the long run, when those funds disappear, that it's likely not sustainable for our community to continue to support that type of investment. So we've been thinking about the long game here for the past 4 years in anticipation of when those funds have dissipated. So I would like to say I've really respect the work of our administrators, the thoughtfulness that went into developing this budget as well as our last 2 years in terms of school budgets. Knowing that, if you just cut 30 positions overnight, that's a major impact on supports that we have in place for students to recover from that type of trauma. So we've really taken an approach of year by year, really looking at attrition and turnover and analyzing where we can be efficient in terms of moving forward, so that the cut isn't too deep, but it is still there in a way that we're still supporting our students related to our CIP, continuous improvement plans to improve the system. And as was reported in the September summit and last year's annual report, we're getting results. I'm really proud of the academic achievement results that we've been getting the past 2 years in terms of school improvement, and looking forward to showing that off again this year in our new annual report to support this budget. But I think I know we are on pace for good, solid results as evidence of our local assessment plan, our fall benchmark data, and now we are entering into the winter benchmark period in January. So we'll be able to share lots of information in the annual report that really projects how we're doing as a school system. And if you can remember, 6 out of 7 elementary schools showed great progress with the VCAP testing. Met with Hannah and Janet Slazinski the other day. UHS just implemented their STAR testing, benchmark testing, and we're up by over 10 points in reading and math. So things are moving in the right direction, and just wanted to give a little background of the history of how we've been budgeting the past 3 years and really trying to think ahead. So, that being said, I'll turn it over to Frank.
Okay, so we have three documents that are been passed around the table. There is one lonely document up here if anyone would like it, and there's probably something in the box there if we need more than one additional. Yeah, and then there you go. Okay, did you want another one?
Yeah, let's do them, there we go.
So the three documents we'll go over, as Deborah said, within our next half hour or so, and obviously leave time for questions. The first one with a graph on is a summary document that I'll start with. There's a single sheet that I developed today that we'll go over as well. It's what Mark spoke to in terms of staffing. And then the big thick document is the detail that correlates with the summary financial statements. The financial statements are, at the summary level, are intended to help folks absorb what the investment looks like at each school site, and then the detail is the same format, it's just every line that supports the budget. So if we could begin with this overview and the summary document. This is a result of, as Mark said, meeting with principals over a course of several weeks, and them engaging leadership councils, their staff, and of course applying their expertise to the development process. So much data is collected and then developed into an initial draft. Back on November 17, we met with the finance committee to look at an elementary fiscal year 27 proposal, and then on the 24th, finance committee, November 24th, met to review the secondary budget and address questions. We met again on December 1st as a finance committee to review the revenue assumptions. How do we think we're going to pay for the plan? And we looked at the capital plan. How do we sustain our buildings so that we have a safe and healthy learning environments for our students over the long term. Today we did get an update on equalized student data out of the Agency of Ed, and I've included a draft version of that, which allows us to calculate an estimated tax rate. And then here we are today on December 16th. I'm looking at the budget timeline that we've shared for our first comprehensive draft, where we put it all together. So as Marcus indicated, a proposal for the period July 1, 2026 through June 30, 2027, the upcoming school year, $69,876,000, a spending proposal increase of 2.6%. You may recall the state tax commissioner letter that we reviewed, I think it was this last meeting. His assessment was that statewide estimate for spending was about 6.8% per student. This compares to our spending of 2.6%, so we're substantially below the estimate that the tax commissioner had forecasted. It's notable that we are one of the top 10 larger districts in the state, so that means there must be several districts spending a lot more than that average number to offset our number. And this is a result, as Marcus said, that careful review of student enrollment, student need first of all, and successful programs that must be sustained, but then the dynamic that across Vermont, and we're no different, enrollment is declining, and we need to reduce staff accordingly. So we'll look at some of the details of that. In general, we continue to spend the majority of our funds, as you see in the blue there on the graph, on direct instruction. The second page of the highlights, just a couple of snapshots of our first draft, and if everything remained the same, meaning what's the assumptions that are in here, then you see that 2.6% would be translated into a tax rate that is lower by 1.6%. We would go from the current tax rate of $1.84, and this is the equalized rate. It's the one rate that you can compare to any other district in the state. And we would go down to $1.82. That's unlikely to hold up given that we haven't received a CLA. The common level of appraisal for our region, generally it comes out next week from the tax department. So just a couple other highlights. When we take our budget, we divide it by the number of students that the state addresses as a weighted student. Our spending per student, $16,178. You see there on page 2. So these are the major drivers of how Vermont has created a funding formula that sets tax rates. So it's the spending per student that is the most important number. The legislature has set 16,470 as a threshold. If we spend beyond, then we get taxed 100% of every dollar over that. And you can see that this budget is well below that. Our proposal is at 16,178, well below the threshold. The next statistic that I mentioned, I've just gotten an update today. The long-term weighted average ADM, it's also referred to as equalized students. This is where they'll take one student who is considered in poverty and they'll add a weight of another one. That's why we know we have about 2,300 kids in our system, but they're giving us a statistic that says use 3,853 kids when you divide your $69 million budget by to create a tax rate that theoretically funds all the intervention and the good work that you've heard about through our board summits and our goal setting processes and so on. So these are the the major impact indices and statistics that we don't really control, but we must use and the whole state uses to develop budgets. Major cost drivers you see on this page 2. Of course, we're a people business, and it is generally our salaries, and we have completed a negotiated agreement for fiscal year 26. This year we're in now, next year, and fiscal year 28. And so that's $794,000, or it's about a 2% impact after we remove the number of positions that Mark has referred to, and we'll talk about more of those in a little bit. Another cost driver, no surprise, you see the second largest cost driver is health insurance increase, $378,000. And then we've gone through the supervisor union budget over the last several weeks, and special education services continues to be a major cost driver. The assessment is up $196,000. That's included in this budget. So those are the major cost drivers, and we were able to mitigate that impact by, as you see there on the highlight document, reducing the 9 positions in the proposed year versus the current year. So we'll talk about what those positions are. And we have also reduced some of our equipment purchasing. So those mitigate some of the cost increases. And then you see on our enrollment, when we add everybody in, we look like we're sort of holding steady in total enrollment, but the state uses a statistic that is only our resident students, and in terms of developing a tax rate, and our resident students are declining. That would be Brattleboro, Dummerston, Guilford, and Putney. And we know when we look at grade level enrollments that our high school classes have been averaging over 200 students per grade level, but they're coming down toward where the elementary averages are, which is more like 170. So as that accumulates, it's another part of matching staffing, with enrollment And as soon as the agency of ed defines Act 73's minimum class size, that's going to drive more analysis on what's possible as we develop fiscal year 28-29 budgets. So that's some of the cost drivers, some of the highlights. The next page in the document is the tax calculation. The format is developed by the state of Vermont. There's a statute that says we're supposed to use this format, so we do. It is hard to read, but I've got some highlights for you. The bottom line is I've already shared with you. In the middle of the document, there's a bunch of line numbers on the left. Line number 18. You see line number 18 is the tax rate I've already referred to. We're at $1.84 today, and if the state went with the tax commissioner's yield number and we left the CLA alone, meaning don't do something with the real estate market, this budget would reduce taxes by 1.6%. As I say, I think it's unlikely that we're gonna see this at the end of the tax department's issuance of the CLA statistics. And I suspect that's why the tax commissioner said statewide taxes are gonna go up 12%. Now, we know that we're proposing a budget substantially less than the tax commissioner's average, whatever, 6% across the state. We're 2.6. But what they must have preliminary data on would indicate that the CLAs are continuing to drop, meaning your tax assessed values in your towns from your town offices are substantially below what real estate is actually selling for in your town. The only exception for that is Putney, because Putney just went through a reappraisal, and in the year we're in right now, if you look at this tax page and you look in this bracket down here, which is the number 34, 35, 36, 37, you see those numbers? That's the common level of appraisal. And Brattleboro 2 years ago was 77% of market value. Your tax assessments in Brattleboro were 77% of market. Then you went down to 70% of market in this year. And I suspect you're gonna see the number that the tax department shares with all of us through your select boards, and then they copy me, is gonna be heading towards 60%. And every time your CLA drops, the state says, well, to be fair across everybody else like Putney, who's done 100% tax appraisal, we're gonna divide your tax rate by your CLA, and that's your tax rate. So that would make a $500,000 tax assessed house in Brattleboro being taxed at $850,000. It's simply tax rate divided by CLA equals the ratchet. And I put a little time into this because this board doesn't control real estate markets. We control how much we spend, and we control the revenue assumptions, the staffing assumptions, and if the state leaves us out of the real estate market, then we are proposing a level funded tax rate, slightly down. But I'm giving you the forewarning. The next budget draft we look at, I should have CLAs from the tax department, and we'll give you the update. Just don't forget that the board is proposing a level tax rate.
Matt, yes.
I wanna make sure I'm understanding you correctly. With the average, so we're one of the 10 largest districts in the state. The average increase expected is about 6%, which, if my math is correct, equates from almost $70 million budget, $4.2 million. We're proposing a 2.6% increase.
1.7 million,
Yeah, 1.7, 1.8, meaning we're saving on average comparatively about $2.3 million.
Fair,
So when
fair.
we're comparing ourselves to other districts, this district, I'm of the mind this district is $2.3 million, more fiscally conservative, appropriate, minded. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, and that's, or another way to say it, if we didn't reduce the 9 positions, we would be in that other bracket.
Of course.
Tim?
At the same time, our per pupil expenditures, which directly impact our property tax, will again come just under the cap, correct?
That's what we just discussed, yeah, on line 15, I made that comment a little while ago. Line 15 is what the state is set as a threshold for fiscal year 27, 16,470. And the, where you see on line 14, our proposal is 16,178. Well below that threshold figure. And that's very intentional.
And I don't know the exact stats, but I believe that most districts in Vermont, I just surmise this anecdotally, are well below that cap. We're one of the unusual districts in coming at right at the cap every year.
And you have some data to support that?
Just anecdotally looking at other districts.
Yeah, if you want to share that with me, I'd love to take a look at it.
Would you argue that it's common to come right at the cap?
I wouldn't argue that. Okay, so the common level appraisal, as you can see, will have a big bearing, giving you sort of how the calculations work. I don't know why the state brought in another layer of complexity to calculating school property tax rates. The Independent Budget Review Committee did a very nice job last year trying to pull that apart in their document that was shared with the public. It's also on our website. But essentially the legislature brought in something called a statewide adjustment last year. Just another round of calculations to get to the actual tax rate. I won't go through all the mechanics of it, but that data is on line 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. It's essentially the state has introduced this concept of a statewide CLA, an average statewide CLA, and then apply that to the yield, and then they unwind it when they do the actual. So I won't go through all the gobbledygook, but because the end result is the same, but there is another layer of calculations that I've shared there on this document. And if you're really into the math, and I know Christina is, line 46 through 54 is the actual math. And what I'm showing there is the way we used to calculate, and on the left and on the right is the way we now have to calculate. That's the actual math. So I want to be respectful of our time, so I'm thinking in just another 5 minutes, and then maybe some questions if we have some, and we can turn our attention to our next topics. Page 4 summarizes our revenue sources, which are local sub-grants from the supervisory union, and then the vast majority you see is state grants. It's the education spending grant. And at this point, on a very preliminary basis, we've included a $600,000 use of our fund balance to help mitigate any tax impact. And you can see that is down from 1.2 million in fiscal year 25. So it's a substantial reduction of where we have had use of fund balance. And the really important numbers on page 4 are projected ending fund balance. That's our solvency. That's to what extent can we weather some other storm ahead. And you see this year 2.2 million in reserves right now. That's the audited June 30, 2025 fund balance in the general fund, 2.2 million. We're planning on applying 500,000 against that, so that brings us down to 1.7. And if we used another 600,000, a preliminary number, we'd still have over $1 million in reserve for future resilience to unforeseen fiscal issues. I won't go over pages 5, 6, and 7. Those are the details behind those revenue assumptions that add up to the 69 million to pay for the budget. Page 8. Page 8 is a summary of a very detailed document, which is the long-term capital plan. And what you see on page 8 is the infrastructure improvements that we have done prior to fiscal year 2026. Those are actual investments. And then fiscal year 26 and 27 are the proposed. 26, the board approved last January, and we put out specifications and bid documents, and we're well on our way to implementing those projects. And our proposal is for a similar size investment. You see the column in the color there, 3.7 million. The infrastructure, the largest numbers are in our usual heating and ventilation, but also in our campus, as well as roofs and so on. And then the second set of data is the same 3.7 million. It's just which sites we're spending the planned improvements on. And you can see cumulatively over 24, 25, 26, 27, 4-year period, just add those totals up and it's 15 million. That is what it takes to sustain nearly 1 million square feet of buildings in our system to serve a little under 3,000 students. The source of funds is identified on the bottom of page 8, which is the partial included in this budget, 2.3 million. And then unfortunately, we've gone from a couple of $1 million in grants down to maybe 100,000 that we have there as an assumption, but we still have at the bottom of that page 8 a reserve in the capital fund for future projects. Drawing down the reserve is intentional under the expectation that the great state of Vermont is going to get back in the business of subsidizing capital improvements in public schools. They left that business in 2007. They used to give us 30% aid. We've been on our own. And this district's done very well in not borrowing and increasing debt and still maintaining excellent contemporary building systems. So I think we can continue that as long as we plan well. So that's my overview. The page 11 through the end of the report is the school site budgets on a single page. And you will see in general, they're all gonna be plus or minus 2.6% in total spending. And then we have the kind of the dictionary, which is simply the detail that supports that data. And you have at the back of your big packet, how to read the financial statement. So the back 2 pages of the big package is the great state of Vermont's uniform chart of accounts, and the way you read the financial statement. What code means what? You know, what's a teacher code mean? What does a nurse code mean? What does, you know, a culinary arts instructor mean? It's all in that nice little dictionary. And the very last page is our budget planning timeline, which calls for a vote in March at the annual meeting and a school board approval of a budget to be warned to the public on January 27th. We have several meetings, as Deborah said, in between.
All right, thank you, Frank, thank you. Thank you. So, let's open it up to a couple of questions, and, with apology, we were running a bit late, coming out of an earlier meeting. Would you stand, identify yourself by, or you could sit. Identify yourself by name and by town, please.
Jody Marmado Dummerston, and I think this is a pretty simple question. It may not be, but you talked about getting rid of 9 positions. What are you counting as positions? And do these account administrative and support positions? And so are you adding anything like an administrative and support if these 9 positions are just teachers? I'm not sure exactly what these are.
Great question. Okay, so now we're to that single sheet that I've shared with everyone out there, and this is where you'll see the usefulness of that dictionary I just referred to. And we use these codes because we're required to. It's the state law, and the whole state uses these codes so that we can compare one school to another. So to answer your question, Jody, you see the same 419 staff at Windham Southeast School District in fiscal year 27. The top block is what we call the function code, which is direct instruction, social worker, counselor, health, and so on. That's what the state calls the school function. And then the bottom set of data, it's the same 419 employees, but it's organized by what you were asking, Jody, what the state calls the object code. So that's by the teacher, the paraeducator, the administrator, and so on. So to answer your question, what we have here is comparing fiscal year 25 budget to fiscal year 27 budget, so that we have the trend data there. But you can do the math between 27 and 26 if you're interested in just 1 year of change. But there it is it's by function. You can see that out of 19 positions on the top there, 8 were direct instruction. Now that doesn't mean all teachers, but that means in the classroom. And then reduction just to 0.6 for the social worker, 4.7 for counseling, and part of that would be clinicians, and so on. So you see the data, but it is pretty evenly dispersed across all of our functions. And of course, where you see 8 position reduction, well, it's by far the largest category of employment, right? You see direct instruction is by far 280 folks, is like multiple of any other department, which you would expect. We're instructors, generally. And then when you come down to the lower data set, it's the same thing. You can see our teachers are 223, 219, and that's of course the largest group of employees, so that's where the largest reduction is. And they are the most sensitive to changes in enrollment, right? If we go from 30 kids in a second grade, we probably would have 2 teachers But if those 30 kids go down to just 26 kids or 24 kids in the third grade, then we might only have one teacher. And that is the analysis that the principals do, and we build the budgets based on that analysis. And of course, it always starts with student needs and what are the outcomes, and make sure we don't compromise the progress Mark was referring to earlier.
Any other questions?
I'll do the math and
Yes.
maybe have questions later.
Yes, okay. Jessica,
I have what I think is a quick question. So you mentioned that.
can you just speak a little louder
Yes.
because of people behind you?
I'll
Yes,
sit this way.
yes.
You mentioned that enrollment is declining among resident students, so that means the increase in enrollment is coming from outside districts, so outside districts are
Tuition
sending-
students. And another kind of significant, I gotta catch up with Hannah and kind of pull some of the subsets apart, but our school choice, so there's tuition, which is choice if a town like Dover or Marlboro hasn't designated a secondary school, so they have that's called school choice, but that's under a tuition statute. And then there's school choice if you live in Newfane, but Newfane designated Leland and Gray as your high school. Well, then there's something called public school choice, where up to 5% of our population can come to Brattleboro from Newfane, and there's no transaction. We don't charge them, and it's a freebie type thing. And we have a lot of those folks because they find Brattleboro a very attractive program. So there's that. We have. I haven't looked at all the subsets, but I know it's not unusual to have foreign exchange students. We have a lot of different students. Unfortunately, we have a lot of homeless students, and so there's just the trend though is our four towns are not sending as many kiddos, and it's particularly noticeable in this year's kindergarten.
So there is a hand up online, and this may very well be our last comment or a question, although I do see a board member. Do I see a board member?
Yeah.
No, but let me just, since I did mention the individual online, Liz Adams, can you unmute yourself?
She's muted.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Liz, thank you.
Okay, it's not a question, it's more a comment. That statewide, many districts have not maintained their buildings, but we have. And somehow, I don't know, when our senators are here, it seems to me like we should get some credit for maintaining our buildings when other people are letting their buildings fall apart. I
Thank
don't know
you,
if that,
Liz.
does that make sense, Frank?
It does.
Kudos to us. Thank you, Liz. Thank you. Tim, last comment, and then we will take a brief break and move on.
I'll try to make it brief. So, like my colleagues here, I'm sure that we've all been through the 196-page budget report, and there's a lot of really good things in that. At its most basic, budget is a reconciliation between values and resources. So for instance, something I appreciated, the unified athletic coach, his salary went up from $24.50 to $79.12, 222% increase. That reflects our value for equity. That was a good thing. There are a lot of questions that we have. Matt, no?
If you're talking
Okay.
about salary, I think not everyone received that information via email. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's in.
Oh, in here. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. So sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
There's other things that I wonder about. There's a $20,000 item for outdoor learning for the academy school. And that's fine, we want kids to learn outside, but we've invested a lot in academy. A couple of million for the expansion of classrooms, the trails in the woods. So we have to wonder, is this the year to cut 3 positions from academy, yet build a outdoor learning space? Which, by the way, I'm sure that the Career Center might have some students who could do it. And then there's other questions that I've been asked about. Tenny Field, one freezing day last week, I was at the high school, and Hannah kindly called the facilities guy to give me a tour of the Tenny Field bleachers. And according to, what's his name, Hannah? Ricky, great guy. Freezing cold day. But he pointed out that the major things left on Tenny Field bleachers are converting the bathrooms from men and women's to gender neutral. Fine, I can go along with that. But the women's section, all you have to do is change the sign. But the men's section, talking to plumbers I know, at the very most, it would be $5,000 to convert a urinal to a.
Okay.
But the point is that we have $100,000 for Tenny Field. And by all the research I could tell, at the very most, it would be $25,000 for the bathroom fix, unless we want to defer that to the following year.
Can I put a pause on this for a moment, only because you have raised several issues in a row, which I don't think we have the time to address this evening. So what I'm wondering is if these issues could be in an email to the Finance Committee Chair and to me, and to Frank Rucker, so that they could be addressed at the next board meeting on June 13.
January.
I'm sorry, January, oh, wow. January 13.
You just took us right.
I
to next
did,
year.
wow. And earlier I wrote 2027 down, so I'm made, yes,
Well, to cut to my main point,
yes.
all I'm asking, I'm not making a motion, is
Nobody would set a motion.
is for the finance director to look at the budget. Everything is essential, but look at it and tell us what would happen if $300,000 were cut from capital projects.
I mean,
A minuscule amount compared to $70 million budget. But it would tell the public that, yeah, we're being as responsible as we can this year in a great year of uncertainty.
this has come up in a previous conversation, what would happen if we cut $500,000? And it might be an interesting calculation to see what the change would be in property tax rate.
No.
But, okay, I was raising perhaps a different issue. But I'm going to say again, Tim, that you have raised several issues that obviously are important as you look at the budget. So you might want to put them in writing so that we can step through them one by one at the next board meeting. Ruby.
I just wanted to alert everyone that there is a finance committee meeting on the 12th of January, which is the day before
Yes.
the board meeting, which means that the window of time between a conversation at our finance committee meeting and the board meeting is very short, but it does provide more space for that conversation, which I think is important. I also wanted to point the board to the fact that there is a section of the big comprehensive budget that pertains to the board, which is on page 164, and I'm going to be asking that the finance committee take a look at that section so that we can present if there were changes or adjustments to make, so that we don't spend an inordinate amount of time in the board meeting.
All right, thank you very much, thank you. So I am, as I said earlier, it's now 7:06 and we are well behind schedule. So I want to thank everyone for this part of the board meeting. We are going to take a break and come back together, in about 5, 6, 7 minutes. All right, and move on to the next part of our agenda, to hear from our guests. Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank Ruby McAdoo, and I want to thank Shannon Kelly for taking this on, for reaching out to our local senators. This was an idea sparked at a recent board meeting. So, thank you to Senator Wendy Harrison and to Senator Nader Hashim for taking the time to meet with us in person. It makes a big difference when it's face-to-face as against Zoom. But thank you to Zoom as well. So I don't have a format in terms of this, but are you comfortable sharing your views about the redistricting and the legislative issues having to do with education reform in Vermont, known as Act 73? And then after questions, is that okay?
Sure.
All right, thank you. So,
Yeah, so thank you for having us. I think I'll just start with some level setting. So for the folks listening and watching who don't follow every single thing that happens in the legislature because you value your mental health, right now we are out of session. So we've been out of session since the end of May. We'll be going back up to the legislature the first week of January. And that is when, in my opinion, the two worlds are going to collide with the report of the redistricting task force and the goals of Act 73. And we'll largely see that what I think is going to be a clash in both Senate Education and House Education, as well as the Ways and Means Committee and the Finance Committee. And so I think that, I'll just share my general views. When Act 73 came up for a vote, I was opposed to it, and my concerns were there were a few concerns. There are some good parts of the bill, but generally my concerns stem from the consolidation of districts and the process in which this legislation was crafted during the session. And I'm very happy with the work that came out of the redistricting task force. Senator Harrison is, I think everybody knows, was on that task force. And I think that is going to be a good counterbalance to what was initially proposed in the bill. And that, I think, is where the clashing is going to happen once the session starts. And the Senate Education Committee is going around the state, doing different meetings at different school boards, or rather different schools, hearing from board members, parents, students, and staff. And I wanted to take the opportunity to come down here and hear from folks in this room, because I try to avoid making assumptions about what people feel about different legislation before the session starts. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it there and then pass the mic over to Senator Harrison.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you so much for having us here. And I'm always up for a meeting. My background is in local government, and meetings are the way that we get things done in a democracy. So I am a member of the task force, the redistricting task force. I agreed to be a member to represent our Senate district, which is the county essentially, which includes this district and 4 SUs. I am not on the education committee. I'm on the transportation committee, and I chair the institutions committee, which is the committee that stopped doing the capital funding a few years ago, which I want to continue seeing if we can work that back in to the institutions committee and into the state process. As all of you know, our education system is just amazingly complicated. I appreciated your budget presentation because it actually helped me see some more logic in the budget, if not necessarily in the state system. But obviously, or maybe not obviously, but the intent of the state in the past, I believe, has been noble. The intent is to make things as fair as possible. But the system is just too complicated. We spent a lot of time in the redistricting task force just explaining how things work. We didn't focus a lot on the funding, except we did look at the cost drivers of education. So our job was to come up with 5 or not 5 necessarily, but that was the hint that was given to us originally. But districts between 4,000 and 8,000 students, which would be very large districts. And the ultimate goal of all of this was to reduce property taxes, which are primarily education taxes, as I'm sure this group knows. So we did start off on that path, and we did come up with some maps. The farther we got, the more we had a problem with our charge. We had 3 former superintendents on the task force. Let me step back a little bit. The task force had 11 folks on it. There were 6 legislators and 5 non-legislators. And I think the non-legislators were really excellent members. Not that the legislators weren't, but the non-legislators had incredible experience. They had energy. We could tell how much they cared about kids fundamentally, and they came up with some great ideas. And so at about 3/4 of the way through the process, they mostly said none of the requirements of the task force are going to make a difference to the main cost drivers, which you all know. It's healthcare. It's the amount of funding that we've needed to spend because of COVID on extra supports for students, capital costs. So what we focused on were, and where we ended up was having a 3-pronged recommendation. So one was to implement, and this had already been happening, the BOCES, which are units that are not governmental. They're kind of like a co-op for school districts where you can buy things in bulk. I mean, that obviously saves money. They also provide, and these are typical in other states, and they have been shown to save money. So you can buy things in bulk. They can do purchasing of services like transportation services for their whole group. They can have special specialty educators that can either provide education to the members or provide training to the members. So those do address the reasons that our taxes have increased. So we're recommending those, and one of them already exists, and we're actually a part of it, and I'd like to know if it is, where it is from your perspective. And then also strategic but voluntary mergers. There are a couple of samples in the report about districts where it could make a difference and it could be helpful if they merge, but we're not recommending forced mergers at all, because we think forced mergers are destructive and they cause lots of stress, and stress is not what our education system needs right now. And then the third item is our comprehensive regional high schools. Brattleboro is an example of a comprehensive regional high school where there is a CTE, you have lots of AP classes. That's probably why lots of kids want to come here. But you are a regional comprehensive high school, and so this is the kind of school that more students in the state need. So that's where we ended. Our report is very long, but it's worth it. You know, it's worth taking a look at. Something that really surprised me is that the central part of Windham County is very similar to the Northeast Kingdom, just in its geography, and both areas are areas where if struggling high schools are closed, that we would have education desert. So kids would not have a school to go to within a reasonable distance. So I think that's actually helpful to the process, because then our area and Northeast Kingdom would have commonality, and we can work together, solving the same sorts of issues. So I'm really proud of our work and happy to be here and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, thank you. So let's open it up to questions, mix of people online as well as in person. Yes, I do. Yes. It projects out, and
Jody Normando from Dummerston, and I want you to know that the majority of the people that are around here are from Dummerston. So, including one of you young men over here. We go to meetings. I want to thank you very much for your group that you were part of. It's the only group so far that has really listened to people, that has really done their research as far as saving costs and what could actually happen. Who's really done their research as to what Vermont looks like. Vermont is not flat. Vermont is not right next to one another. I mean, even in Dummerston, we come a long ways from hilltops to the schools that we've got now in Putney. We're not set up to have a desert for schools. And I think that this task force has really looked into those issues. Now, whether you can get the legislature, because they're gung-ho, the leaders of the legislature plus the governor are gung-ho in going this way. And I'm sorry that we only have one representative here tonight from Guilford and Vernon, and that we don't have more, because I think 3 of Brattleboro's reps we need to talk to. We maybe even need to talk to our rep up in Dummerston and Putney area. But to really get them to read what's going on, to follow the money and see where it's going. And it's never been proven that merging saves money. Now, I think, our people have worked really hard to save money here in this district, but I think the public has pushed them to really work hard too, because we question the budgets. And in a merged budget, even ours, looking at something like this with a budget, is far different than what I, as a school board member and a public member of Dummerston, did in town meeting. The public barely understands the small town budget. And when you get this far, and then you merge even further up to White River Junction or wherever they were threatening to merge, nobody in the public's going to understand, and nobody in the public's going to be involved in education. And it's a shame to lose that. So thank you, Wendy and Nader.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can I just add,
Absolutely.
I didn't talk about the public comment that we took. We were required to have 2 public hearings, and we had 4. And we also received information from some other education folks who sent out some surveys, and we heard from more than 5,000 people in the state. And the vast majority of them said, don't force us to merge, keep going the way you are.
I could also add something. Jody, thank you. Your phrase "follow the money" reminded me of another point in this whole conversation. When we first got this charge to come up with Act 73, it was right after the sticker shock of the last tax letter about the double-digit tax increases. And in my opinion, I think both the administration and the legislative branch had a sort of knee-jerk reaction to figure out what they think was the most expedient way to reduce costs and ideally reduce taxes. And so it went directly to the schools connected to property taxes. When, at least in my opinion, one of the biggest cost drivers, and we also heard this earlier, is health insurance. And each year we're seeing double-digit increases to health insurance premiums, which is affecting the budget or budgets for many districts. And on top of that, taking another step back, peeling back the onion more, is looking at housing and the economy in Vermont, generally speaking, and just the lack of people that we have in this state. We have made significant investments in housing, but those investments take years to see the return on it and to see more people coming into our state. But now I'm kind of sort of getting off topic into other areas, but just wanted to throw that out there.
I think it's all connected, yes. Kim Price.
You just spoke about the health insurance. The state took that away from districts to negotiate. What's the state going to be doing about negotiating the health benefits and getting better rates? Because you took it out of our control, and it doesn't seem like the state's done anything to try to negate those increases.
We actually, we did a lot last year. It's gonna take a couple more years to see the impact of it. But there's something called reference-based pricing, where the insurance companies can only charge a certain amount above what Medicaid charges, and we've instituted that. So that will start to reduce, not to reduce the actual amounts, but it'll limit the increase in healthcare, health insurance, which is huge. So we are working on that.
Okay.
And there's some other couple things that we did for health insurance.
For Christina Naylor, Dummerston, I just want to thank you for thinking about doing no harm, because as somebody who's followed the budgets for a long time and served on the school board, the changes that are made without thoughtfulness takes the focus of all the minds on this table off serving our students and serving our teachers, and puts it in a reactionary mode. And I serve on the Budget Review Committee. I have for the past 5 years, where we attempt to explain the budget to the public in a format that is accessible and tells people how it affects their pockets. And we've had to do that report over at the last minute, I think 3 of the last 5 years, and 2 of them due to legislative changes. For example, last year there was going to be a hold harmless if you went over a certain percentage, and that changed at the last minute. And so it was extra work for me, but when I think of the extra work for our administration and for the board members, it really takes the focus. And so I want to thank you for thinking thoughtfully and implementing carefully any change that needs to be made. And I'm really interested in the BOCES. I heard about it recently. I did the research. The research is very compelling in other parts of our country, and one of our IDRC members came from a state where it worked great. I think we have an N=1 around here, which is nothing to base your data on. But I look forward to seeing how the legislature can support assuring that the BOCES are delivering a high quality product, because it's hard for any organization to give up control to another organization where they're not hiring directly. So I think it's food for thought for the legislature to ensure we're getting high quality services.
Definitely, and thank you. And the BOCES were authorized 2 years ago, so they are able to be in existence. And there is one that we heard from that is in existence, or it's. I keep looking to Frank because I would think you would be part of it, because this district is part of it, of the first BOCES. So there is one that is in process of coming into.
I think we're very new.
Yeah,
in,
it is.
And
It is
yes,
very
in seeing it mature.
Yeah.
I'm going to call on David Scholes online.
Thank you, Deborah. Question for Senator Hashim. Is your committee going to take up take testimony and start looking into the details around creating centralized or cooperative administrative services when you get back in the legislature in a couple of weeks?
So that's
on your agenda?
So that is something that remains to be seen. I think that we should be having it on the agenda. As you may have seen, last year we did not take testimony from the Commission on the Future of Education, which was another summer commission made the previous biennium to provide us with input and guidance as to how to do all of this work. We didn't hear from them. The House Education Committee did, but when we got back into session, as you know, we came up with another task force, which came back with the reports that we're talking about now. So I'd like to be optimistic, and for this, I'm going to assume that we will hear from the redistricting task force about the reports that came out, but I'm not the chair or the vice chair, and I don't have a say in how the agenda is crafted, but I will want to hear from the redistricting task force.
Great, thanks.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Shannon Kelly. I live in Bellows Falls, but I am a district employee. Healthcare has been mentioned a couple of times here, and it is a huge expense. And I recently learned my little Vermont history about how we came pretty close to establishing universal healthcare in this state. And I'm wondering, does the political will exist to revisit that concept, as far as you know?
The short answer, does the political will exist to revisit that? The short answer, I think, is no, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think that it would be great to explore the idea of regional cooperation, or a regional network like New England, for example, developing some sort of universal New England health insurance plan. That would be awesome. But it would also take an act of Congress because of interstate commerce. And I think we all know that Congress is a bit dysfunctional at the moment. So my candid, straightforward answer is I don't think that the political will at the moment exists in the state legislature for Vermont to independently create universal health care.
I saw her hand here a few minutes ago. Yes.
My name is Zon Eastos. I'm state representative for Windham, for Guilford and Vernon. I just wanted to add to the previous comment that at a meeting that I was at for the House, there was a promise that the chair of the Education Committee said that they would be taking up this report as part of their work. So I just want folks to know that at least in the House, it's a step going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Good to hear.
Thank you. Thank you. I see Liz Adams' hand up, and then I'm trying to call on people in order. Liz?
Hi. I thought it was a pretty low down play to give that throwdown to the legislature right before crossover day. But what I'm not hearing acknowledged in our cost for education is that our schools provide so many social services and things that the funding should be taken from other agencies and dumped into the ed fund, because if we're providing all these services for kids, other states don't generally do that. And that's that's a big reason why our cost per pupil is higher. It's because we take care of the whole child. And I haven't heard a peep about that, and it bothers me. The other thing was and this is just something that I raised with Frank tonight. A lot of districts have not taken care of their buildings. So they now are pretty decrepit and need a lot of help. Our district has always taken care of its buildings. We don't need money from the state to do so. We've just done it. And that's one reason why our costs may be higher than like the town of Franklin. And I'm wondering if anything comes up with that, would there be any way to, I don't know, give some credit to districts that did take care of their buildings? And one more thing is, if they want their proposal just doesn't work for Vermont. What Governor Scott wants doesn't work for Vermont at all. I don't know why there was no mention that you would have to build new schools to carry out that kind of a plan, or put kids on buses for an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to school. There was just no mention of it. So, Wendy, I really appreciate your work this summer, and I've been following it, and I'm really pleased with what your committee recommended. But I think, I think that the legislature has never addressed whatever they've added to schools, different bills over the years telling schools have to do this or that. And then the piece of getting some money from other agencies for the services that we're providing our students. And I think, we spend quite a bit on their health care, on their health, mental health especially. And we're still, despite we're, post-pandemic and a lot of those positions have gone away, there's still an awful lot of homelessness and kids who need a lot. So if you would carry that back and shout it out, because nobody wants to talk about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. Tim Maciel?
Yeah, thank you both for coming. My question is about the foundation formula. Now, so each district will get a set amount from the state, determined by the state. My question is about district level financial modeling, something that Act 46 lacked. It promised efficiencies, but it never gave us really district level financial modeling to see what the result of it would be. My question to you is, before you vote on a foundation formula or a governance structure, would you hold off until there's really district level specific financial modeling, which would show there's bound to be winners and losers? Some districts are going to get more, some less. So would you hold off on voting for something until that modeling is done?
Yes, so that's in some ways what happened last session. Our joint fiscal office, which is a group of nonpartisan economists who do financial analysis for us worked very extensively in creating all sorts of different financial models and kind of a mapping of what different districts, hypothetical merged districts would look like financially under different weights and variations of the formula. So thankfully we do have that capacity in our joint fiscal office to create for the legislature these different models to see how the changes would impact different hypothetical districts if they're made.
And would those be released to the public?
Yes, everything that's set, yes, they would be released to the public.
But then it also gets complicated because it's not necessarily a static number, it doesn't stay the same. And so a big concern of the small districts, like in the central part of our county, is that since the funding follows the student, they could lose funding because of that. So that's an important thing to model too, is what happens when kids are moving around.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes. Please
Senator,
identify yourself and your town.
of course. My name is Riley Bristol. I'm a student representative and I'm from Dormiston. Senator Harrison, you mentioned educational deserts in which students would have to travel inappropriate amounts of time to get to school each day. Is there a legislative decision on how long that is considered inappropriate?
That's a really good question. We used a half hour to get to a school. So a desert in our area would be if Leland and Gray or Twin Valley closed, that there would be a desert in the middle part of our county. And there's actually some really cool maps that I can show you if you want that show that. The GIS people were wonderful, and now we actually have some really good data, and that's also accessible to the public too. So you can go on the website and play around with maps and just see for yourself what it looks like. It's a really interesting state geographically.
Thank you.
If I can also add to that, so part of Act 73 tasked the State Board of Education to come up with different sets of rules, and one of those sets of rules has to do with sparse by necessity, small by necessity schools, which serve areas that would otherwise be educational deserts. And as Senator Harrison was saying, if you go on that website, the State Board of Education, you can actually find the rules that they came out with, I think, just several days ago. It's actually right here, and I can just give you this copy if you want. But you can see some of the guidelines that they've created for how a school could be considered small by necessity and thus potentially avoid the risk of merging or closing down. But part of it takes into consideration transportation times.
Me again.
Jody Norman
First of all, I want to
Doverston.
back up Liz's comments, because this has been a big issue with a lot of us that talked about what happened with Act 46 and everything. And the cost drivers, the people were complaining about their taxes. They weren't asking the legislature or the governor to change education. I don't think they had any problems with that, but they wanted to look at the cost drivers that were actually in there. And over the years, and I've been on the school board twice in Dummerston, and I've been totally involved in Act 46 and all these the forced mergers. We were forced to merge. And every one of our towns overwhelmingly voted not to merge. And so I believe wholeheartedly that schools probably are the best place to have some of these social issues in them, because the kids are there. If they could get some dental health, if they could get some more doctor help, or homeless for clothing or food or whatever. But as Liz said, I want to look at her because she's usually, I'm used to having her around because she's been on the board for so long. All these unfunded mandates that came from the state to do this and do that, but no money to go with it. And it takes away from the education. And it should be funded under the general fund or a social fund. And I really hope that that can change and, you know, make a difference with it. So it's hard. Legislatures tend to get up there and they tend to get in the Democratic mode or the Republican mode and following their leaders. And I just wish we had a lot more independents that would speak out for themselves. Just because you're Democrat doesn't mean you have to follow the Democratic leader. Follow your conscience and follow what you really believe in. And I think our people do, and I hope it continues that way.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
agree with you.
Thank you.
And just generally with funding, there are so many different ways that you can use funding so we put a lot on the property tax in Vermont. We don't have a lot of different ways of funding things. And so, yes, definitely. Other states do provide support for kids, but they don't necessarily put it in the education funding, exactly. But it is important that we keep providing those supports.
Because we'll get blamed because our budgets are so high because we do supply so much stuff for our kids.
But our kids and focusing on the kids is where we need to start.
That's where it's at. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that statement. Frank Record.
Couple of comments, if I could.
Yes.
Just to sort of respond to some of the conversation. The issue around health as a driver, absolutely, the massive driver, we all know that. It seems to me the legislature could revisit the actuarial values that are created in the plan. That is in the purview of the legislature. It is what establishes the level of benefit, and then, of course, the level of benefit is what establishes the cost. So I haven't studied it carefully, but I know that I believe it's the VHI group, you know, the largest school pool in the state. It was through the Vermont School Boards Insurance Trust, and then there was a split to, I think it's called Vermont Education Health Initiative, right, VHI. It's where pretty much all 8,000 school employees get their health insurance in Vermont. My understanding is the actuarial cost of that is about 98%. And if the legislature redefined that and said it's going to be 92%, you would save millions of dollars across the state. So it's something that it seems to me is overdue to be reviewed. The plan design. So that's one thing. The other topic you were talking about is the BOCES. We are part of the BOCES. It's been in existence for 3 years. Conceptually, the intent was to create a regional special services program. We've also asked the BOCES to provide us with some of those specialized services that you've talked about, like a school psychologist. Over the 3 years, they've not been able to provide any of our the solutions that we've asked for, and unfortunately, that is the nature of Vermont. They can't do it because we can't do it either. It's that we are small rural systems generally, and a lot of the highly specialized skill sets are not readily available in our region. So that's a challenge, and I don't have a lot of confidence in the concept of a BOCES organization, which is not a governance structure. It's simply, like you said, a co-op. So it's optional. Just a comment on that. And then the last thing I would say about cost drivers, the largest cost driver by far in the state of Vermont is class size. And Act 73 tried to begin addressing that, but Act 73 didn't define what they mean by class size. It should have been, in my opinion, a student-teacher ratio. It's very easy to talk about that and to plan for that, to work with principals, to work with teachers, to work with school boards, but we're talking about class size. So what does that mean? When that gets refined, hopefully this legislative session, I do believe that it will lead to significant changes in the cost drivers across the state. Windham Southeast is pretty good shape. We're large enough so all of our schools, our smallest schools, generally meet that minimum class size, whatever class size means. We generally meet it, but Marlboro School's been in the papers a lot. They absolutely don't meet it. Jamaica School, absolutely. Across the state, so many of our small schools are nowhere near the minimum class size, and that's the cost driver. Because you want to offer literacy, math, science in your elementary school, you want to offer phys ed, music, art, you put those professionals in front of 6 kids. What is it, Marlboro has 4 kids, it's 5 kids average grade size, right? You cannot do it with a cost per student funding model, and that's, I don't understand why the legislature is held on to a cost per student model when enrollment in the state is diving from 100,000 to 80,000 and costs keep going up. It's about the worst model you could adopt, and that's why we're suffering with the tax rates that are out of control. So, few comments.
Good comments, and I don't know the answer to the BOCES except that I know that there was something very significant that happened in the last few months to them. So it could be that they weren't fully operational in these 3 years. But I know it also took them 4 years to get where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate your skepticism, and I will get back to you on that and just get back to everybody. And I want to know what's happening because that wasn't the way it was sold to us.
Just a clarifying, when you had mentioned, I appreciate the points, but regarding the class size standards, I think you had mentioned that they weren't defined in Act 73. What do you mean?
So, for example, in our system, we have about 200 teachers, direct instruction in the classroom, and then we have another 34 academic support teachers, which are vital and have probably a reason why our trajectory of student growth and proficiency has really taken off. So when we talk about a class size, do we just talk about the second grade teacher divided by the number of kids in that second grade class? Or do we talk about the second grade teacher with the academic support teacher? So now you've got 2 professionals in that class. Then that's a very different measure, right? And I've asked this question of the Agency of Ed, and they're like, yeah, we need to define that. And I think they might get to it in January when the budgets are already on their way to the printer. So but that's just one example, right? Yeah. There are, as you just heard in this conversation, there are so many other supports, professionals in a classroom for our kids. What is your classroom definition? Does it include the social worker, the clinician, the academic support teacher, the coach, the paraeducator? There's no definition. And so it's kind of a meaningless policy position at this point. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, all right. I'm calling on people in order in terms of online. Krista, online, I don't see a last name, so would you identify yourself and your town of residence, please?
Krista Yagjian, and I live in Guilford. Good? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I always like to talk about special education. I think that some of my community member neighbors really feel that special education spending is a big reason that property taxes are rising. And I really want to know two things, like how do we kind of make sure that myth, because I think there are a lot of things, as we've noted in this meeting, that contribute to property taxes, kind of make sure good information comes out about that. And how do we make sure special education really is really considered in a lot of the conversations? Sometimes I attend meetings where I really don't see special education really represented, and we have 20%. At least 20% of our students in Vermont receive special education in Vermont. And so, just to Frank's point, I think sometimes we're talking about models, but we're not really thinking through the logistics of whether they're really possible. Like we talk about how wonderful it would be to be sharing resources, but if you can't find the staff in these areas, then that still doesn't happen, right? And we really want to keep kids in their home schools. We don't want kids to be moving to other schools. Like, how do we kind of make sure that the tenets in terms of what we believe in terms of special education is still part of the conversation? So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Krista, for those remarks. Shannon, I saw your hand up.
Yes. I have a question about taxes, and this is another area that I'm not an expert on, but I keep up with public assets and a lot of their analysis, so I'm wondering where you stand in terms of, like, and again, not an expert, on addressing that tax cliff of the 89,000 household income to 90,000, like, greatly increases. I don't know what it is, but where do you stand on shifting to an income tax versus property tax for funding education? I guess is my general question. And sorry if I'm being confusing. So, income tax. What are your thoughts?
So, I think that Vermont's the average income from, well, let me rephrase this. So we have explored the idea of shifting to an income tax, and there were points in the conversation in which the idea of shifting to an income tax is something that would not be as feasible as folks might think it is. That's kind of the very broad and frankly vague answer that I can give you, because I'm just trying to draw from my memory from last January of when we were first initiating this conversation, and so I don't want to just pull things out of thin air. I can probably go back and find the notes that I have on that and share with you the information about it, because we get presentations, we get joint fiscal office coming in, and this information is all still posted on our committee page. So I can dig that up and find it for you if it's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that could
so-
come to me and I will certainly pass it along. Yes.
Yeah, and it's always a balance, right? There's income tax and there's property tax, and local governments like property tax because property stays, right? It doesn't move away. So property tax is a really important mechanism, and I can't see us getting rid of the property tax, for example. But then there are other things. We instituted a very small payroll tax a couple of years ago that pays for child care. It both subsidizes parents at a higher income level, and it also provides funding for the folks who are providing the care to be compensated at an appropriate level. So it was a very small tax. I saw it's listed as one of your items in your budget, so you all pay it. When we were considering it, it was restaurants and most private sector companies who came to us, and they said, please do this tax because our employees are not coming to work because they lack childcare. And there was one company, it was a restaurant, who said that they would make up in 3 days what it would cost them in absent employees for a month. So they saw a huge benefit to this program. So you just gotta be very strategic about what especially with a new tax, what you're gonna get for what you are proposing. And that was a 10-year process to get that enacted. So this actually coincidentally is also a 10-year process that we're proposing. So it's better to take your time, understand the parameters, make sure that the public is on board before you institute it. But if we're smart about it, we can do more.
Thank you. David Scholes, I see your hand up.
Just as a segue,
Yes.
David's coming on, that child tax is about, in this budget here, 136,000.
Okay, and what percent? It's pretty, I mean, I noticed it, so, yeah. So maybe it could be that your employees are more able to come to work if they have, yeah. And also just as an employer, I would hope there's a benefit to you and for just parents knowing that their kids are taken care of. It's really important.
Thanks, Deborah.
David Scholes of Brattleboro.
David Scholes from Brattleboro, thank you. I'm glad Frank mentioned Marlboro as an example of a small school and the community struggles that are happening around the state in the places where the numbers just are too small to sustain a school. And I think Marlboro is a good example of how communities deal with it because they are openly, publicly having a thoughtful conversation about the options given the many changes that are happening across the state. So I think, but the question the legislature is going to have to deal with, that you senators are going to have to deal with, is whether you let processes like in Marlboro proceed and let communities decide whether it's time to close the schools or whether the state decides it. And I think that's why the Agency of Education is looking into the small and sparse definitions so that the places where, to help solve that problem. I think it's really important to point out the Agency of Education did some estimates, a distribution of the education payment, which is the foundation amount that everybody would get. And the X76 formula categories for this year, if we were doing it for FY25, and small schools, the 69 small schools in the state of Vermont with enrollments of less than 100 consume 0.8%, not even a full percent of the total payment, which is $1,883,883,000,000. The small schools consume 0.8%. So that's just forcing them to close. It's just fiscally ridiculous. Never mind the effect or the impact on the communities. The other thing that the agency found is that nearly 29.5% of the total payment is the weighted money that goes to students who are coming from poverty. It's almost 30% of the budget is added on to the foundation amount, the base amount, to pay for those kids, 30%. So if you want to save money, focusing on effective, systematic approaches to reducing the needs of those kids is much better than just tossing it into the pot with all the other money. So I hope you'll consider looking at where that money goes and how it's being used. And the other thing is in terms of teachers and classrooms and students' needs, if you want to look at what's really needed in classrooms, what's needed in schools, you have to talk to the teachers. They're the ones that know the kids. They know what interventions are necessary. They know what they need. You can't expect to get that information from legislators, certainly not from the teachers union, because that's not what they focus on. And you're not going to get it from the superintendents or the principals either, because they're not in the classrooms. They're administrators. They're not educators in the classrooms. So hear from the practitioners, please. You get all these lobbying groups that come in and tell you what they think, and then you have to decide what to do with it. You don't hear from teachers. So I encourage you to invite them in large numbers and invite people to come and talk to you about what they really think about class size. what's needed in the schools. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I really am in support of listening to teachers. I think that's critically important. So, yes. Frank, you had your hand up, and then
I just wanted to respond to David Scholes' comment, and that is there's a disconnect between making an association with a small school. I think David said there's 69 small schools with less than 100. I don't doubt that. So I would agree with the statement that is highly likely a very small portion of the ed fund. However, that's not the way taxes work. So if you are in my community, which includes Brookline, Newfane, Jamaica, Stratton, then those small schools, I agree with David, they are spending very little of the ed fund. But where I live is the highest taxation in the whole state. And it's because you have small schools like Jamaica, who maybe they only spend $500,000. That's a drop in the bucket to the ed fund. But if they only have 15 kids, which I think they only have 14 now, 500,000 divided by 15 kids is $33,000 a kid. That's what sets my tax rate. That's what sets so many people's tax rates across the state. It's not how much you spend, it's how much you spend per kid. And that is the problem with the small schools. And it's a policy issue that has to be resolved.
I definitely want to avoid a debate. Let's hear a cross section of voices. I think that's really important, and there are so many. Next person to speak is Molly Steiner.
Stoner.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Stoner. Molly Stoner. I know who Molly Stoner is. Yes. Please unmute yourself, Molly.
Sorry about that. I clicked on
Good. Perfect.
and I just wanted to say you're absolutely right. The Swiss heritage of my name is Steiner, so way to go.
Well, thank you.
I mean,
I knew that.
230 years ago, but you got it. You nailed it. I just had two comments. One is about the taxes discussion that we've had, and I just want to encourage our legislators to put everything through the lens of progressive rather than regressive taxes. I fully support the program of with the most recent payroll tax, but payroll taxes are very regressive and affect those at the lower income level much more than at the higher income level. So I would just encourage any kind of tax structure about anything, education and otherwise, to always be put through that lens of who are we affecting more. And the other thing I wanted to say is just in response to David, when he commented about speaking to teachers, I really appreciate the comment. I also work with the union pretty directly, both locally, state, and nationally. And I just want to say, David, that a reminder that the union is the teachers. And so, for example, on the political ed action team committee that I serve on with the state, we help guide Colin Robinson, Jeff Pennon in their advocacy, and every member of that committee is a teacher. So I just wanted to not put forth that the union and the teachers are somehow different entities. And by the way, I would like the legislators also to know that I think it's February 25th, it may be the 24th. I'm unable to attend this year, but there's going to be an education-specific actions at the State House with lots of educators are going to come. So please feel free to talk with teachers at that time and feel free to come in to our schools any Monday.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Other comment? Yes,
Just a quick one. I think, and judging from the way we live here and with the ski areas throughout the state and the properties that people who are not living here, if they're second properties, third properties, or whatever, I think something has to be done in the legislature between property taxes and second homeowners, et cetera, and versus income. So.
Yes,
Agreed.
yes, yes. I think you hear universal, universal tapping to that. Yes. I see another hand up. Flo.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you identify yourself
Yes.
by name and your town of residence, please?
Flo Levin, I'm a teacher in Dummerston. I just wanted to remind people that teachers are taxpayers. Teachers are impacted by all of this in the same way that everyone is, as well as being the people on the front lines providing for our kids and totally dedicated. You know, most teachers I know not only, teach, we also volunteer. We're also the people in the community. We're also the people who do a million other things. And, everything is so interrelated. There's a shortage of teachers because we can't afford to live here either. There's a housing shortage, which means some of my colleagues have left. My young colleagues have decided they can't afford to live here. And so, I just want to remind people that when you're talking about teacher voices, we're also the people in the community that are paying the taxes. And it's really, really essential that we think that way. Hearing the comment about the BOCES not being able to hire the people that the districts need has to do with the cost of living and the cost of what we can pay. Because those PhD psychologists that we need and the people that we need to do other things can make more money elsewhere and be able to afford to live elsewhere. So I guess my point is that when we're looking at it, and there are so many bigger systems issues that impact everything, the reminder about teacher voices is that we're also the community members. And that's just really, really essential. My one other comment is about sort of the class size and how that is determined and how many staff there are. And I do think it's really essential that we keep coming back to the people who are actually on the ground in the classroom. So when we're looking at the number of staff for the number of students, we need to look at the number of people in the building working directly with students, whether they're social workers or coaches. If they're directly working with students, that's very different than if they are not on the ground in the schools working directly with the students. And that is one of the questions about kind of what the cost drivers are, at least for me. And I did want to thank the task force, Wendy, for the incredible work that you did. And I really appreciate the listening and thinking about what the real world is like and the geography of Vermont and what it looks like here in terms of schools and districts and what that means for all of us. So it's so complex. And I do believe that we're all coming from the right place. And I think so many of the bigger systems really need to change, and we have to focus on the things that matter. And I do think it's essential that teacher voices are a big part of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate the time that we've had this evening to come together to talk about these issues. Do I see a hand?
I was going to raise my hand.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that this is the last comment and then we sort of pull this together. Ruby McAdoo of Putney.
Yes, I'm Ruby McAdoo, Putney. I am on the school board. I just wanted to share my appreciation that you're here tonight. I think that it's so important. I very much appreciated the work the task force, and generally speaking, the kind of need for pulling together public input. But I don't think we, at a statewide level, are doing a very good job at it. And I think that we as a district are trying and not doing a very good job at it. But we're trying. And this is an example of it. And so I would, I know that we have one representative here. Good job for coming. And I'm sure that there are others online. I hope that there are more opportunities for this. It's listening, but it's also, opportunities for us as community members to speak. And I can say that when I talk to my constituents and my neighbors, they are frustrated and they feel powerless. And I cannot turn to them and say anything of import. And I am one of the more, informed people in my social circle. And so that is alarming to me. And so from my perspective, it's really important for us to hear what you have to say and what is coming. And so, that's, I guess a question I have, although I know that there might not be a concrete answer, is I would really love in layperson's terms to understand what is on the horizon. Like, what should we be expecting? If I leave today and I go and report back to my neighbor, this is what happened in the meeting. And what they want to hear is, what's going to happen to my school district? What's going to happen in 6 months and 1 year? And I don't know when we'll have that information, but I think it's critically important to understand that your average person, that's what they care about. And I want to see the legislature start to really respond pointedly to that. Not to say that what I'm hearing is good and you're engaging, but those are the questions that I feel like people have that are the most burning.
That's a really, we probably both have comments on that, just if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So if the task force had done what the legislation said we should have done, and if we had maps, we would be able to predict pretty well what was going to happen in this session, because Act 73 is very prescriptive. There are all kinds of things that were going to happen. Those things might still happen, but we now there's a lot of uncertainty, more uncertainty than there was. Personally, I'm glad that we didn't do. I'm glad we are where we are. We can talk about what the other things that Act 73 includes, but I think not tonight. Right. But that's a really, really good question. So I would just say stay in touch with us through the session. The session's only 4 months. It's not a lot of time. Stuff happens really fast. Watch Nader's meetings if you can. Give him support.
The support would be great. I think, Ruby, one of the things that you highlighted was one of the unintended consequences of the conversations that we were having in the legislature, going all the way back to January, because every week we were going in a new direction, both in the House and the Senate, new direction, and then just changing like the wind. And there are parents and teachers and staff and board members watching these meetings, wondering if their school is closing in a year, or if they're going to lose their job, or if they're merging, or if they're not merging. And all these conversations about hypotheticals and going in all sorts of different directions without a clear roadmap for the future does create a lot of stress and anxiety, and I just want to acknowledge that we have been seeing that, and I'm grateful that people are telling us about it, because it's something that we need to take into consideration when we are coming up with these ideas. And in terms of staying in touch, that's why, I mean, these meetings are good. I mean, if we didn't come here, I would not have heard about the changes that need to be made specifically regarding the class sizes, for example. And now I know on page 28, line subsection A, that's where we need to make some amendments. And so, that's why these in-person meetings are very important. And I'm definitely happy to come by. I want to say 2 months from now, we'll probably have more clarity. Fingers crossed, we'll have more clarity about what the roadmap looks like when it comes to Act 73, redistricting, and education in general.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening. This has been really informative, and it will definitely not be the last time that we reach out to both of you for more information and updates. So thank you very much for this evening. Thank you. Thank you. We are going to take a 10-minute break right now, okay? I'm sorry, I heard, a 10-minute break, just to shut down this part of the meeting before we begin the next part. All right, we are back from break. Student matters, I don't have a screen in front of me, so yes, Willow Sharma.
Willow Sharma. I just would like to recognize our UHS staff. Last week we had our STAR testing. I don't know about the rest of the district in other schools, but at the high school level, Riley and I have mentioned this before, that it's been very difficult for students to go through this testing and put their full effort forward, and that's definitely skewed a lot of our results. And I just want to say thank you to Ms. Parker and the rest of our admin for really working hard to get our students excited about it and pressure them in a beneficial way to do their best. And I mean, it's definitely showed in our plus 10 points in reading and math. So just wanted to recognize
Great.
that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's good news. Any students online? I'm relying on you, Matt. No students online. Okay. All right, we are going to move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Public comment on non-agenda items. Jody Normando of Dummerston.
Good, I don't have to announce myself again. I just started watching the last meeting that you had, and I wanted to agree with something that I think Ruby said, so she'll tell me if it's wrong. That's one good thing about Ruby, you know where she stands. You said that less people come to meetings. Well, less people come to meetings because so many of us, and I put us in there because I'm getting tired of going to annual meetings, and it used to be the high school meetings when we had our town meetings. We had a budget that was like this. Now take a look at what the budget looks like. Who understands it? Nobody understands it, unfortunately. And I'm not saying it against the administrators because it has to be that way because we're forced merged, unfortunately, against our will. So people feel like it's useless. Why go? Because in fact, a lot of people complain that it's staffed with people who are involved with the schools, and they're public too, but it's not the rest of the public. So that's why they don't come to meetings. It's not like going to our town meeting. So I wanted to say that. I wanted to say that I'm also heard on that last meeting, I think it was, if it wasn't the one before, when they were talking about a policy and an evaluating of administrators. And I want to say that teachers and students are the people that are on the ground, both of them. And I do think that teachers need to be representative on evaluations. And I don't care how it's done. It doesn't have to be. I sat against my favorite teacher when I was on the Dummerston board years ago when we were doing teachers evaluation, and it's a hard thing to do, I'll tell you.
I'm going to stop you for one reason, Jody, because what you're talking about is actually a supervisory union issue
Oh,
and not a SD issue. So I
Right.
just wanted to just shift the gears a little bit.
But this was a policy meeting that I understood was a policy, so.
But it is,
So-
it is directed, the policy committee is fluid. And that was specific to the supervisory union.
Okay.
Yes,
But I
okay.
still want to be on record as standing behind the
Okay.
teachers and the students,
Mhm.
because that's that's where it's happening. And then tonight, you said somebody made the fact, it was Matt, who said that minutes only say this and that. If you get to that point of saying the minutes are only this and that, you've lost me and everybody else, because not everybody watches you on television. And so reading the minutes, you need to have some idea of what's going on and who's saying what, because we're the ones that vote for you guys to be here. So I wanted to add that. I also wanted to, did I ask this one earlier? Where's Frank? He's gone. I did ask this one about the 9 people that you let go. Are they including the people that leave automatically? You know, who are these 9 people other than the sheet of paper that we got that told you who they are? Because every meeting you have new hires and people who are not staying with us. So how is that figured out? And are these people just teachers? Or there are all these different people on the page is what that 9 includes, right? Okay. And in one of them, I didn't see administrators on it and half of the page, but I saw administrators on the other half of the page. So it does include administrators?
Yeah, like I shared in the beginning, we've been really focused on attrition and reducing positions the last 3 years as a way to have an effect on the ESSER funds that we utilize to increase resources for
That was
the
promised
pandemic.
that we wouldn't keep them, and
Yeah.
we did keep them longer. I know, because it was necessary, because of what the kids are going
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
Because I'm all for the kids. I don't care what it is, it's the kids that are important. So thank you.
That's why we're here.
Okay, all right. Any other comment on non-agenda items? Anybody with hands up online?
Nothing.
No, nothing online. All right, we are moving on to the administrative report.
Okay, so I just have one new hire to announce tonight. Academic support teacher at Putney Central School, Jennifer. I'm gonna butcher this last name. Maybe you can help me, Ruby.
Dima Yuga.
Yes.
Dima Yuga, Dima Yuga, okay. Okay, is there a motion to support the hire of Jennifer Dima Yuga?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Welcome, Jennifer Dima Yuga. Is there any other business?
That's it for tonight.
That is it for tonight. All right, we are moving on to board matters. Leadership Council updates.
Guilford's tomorrow.
Okay, so I'm going to say we can see the schedule online. Any other Leadership Council updates? Yes.
I just have a couple of quick ones. Green Streets was yesterday, and they were excited to share that they have had no restraints used this year. Their attendance is improving, and that we are focusing on working on improving family engagement.
Okay, fabulous. Anything else? Leadership Council.
Just quickly from Early Education Services. One of the things that they work very hard on is staffing, and finding it very difficult to hire people because of the load in terms of fingerprinting and the background checks. So people in those roles generally need to have 2 background checks. One is done at the school level and one is done at the state level. The school level seems to be going fine. The state level takes a lot longer. There's only one person at the state who does that. So they have had hirings that have taken as long as 5 to 6 months to get somebody on board. And often they lose people during that time because they find other work that they need. So there's a lot of work that they're trying to do with early education services on the state level to try and get some way through that impasse.
I'm wondering if we could appeal to the federal government in terms of increased hiring on the state level. Well, I also want to say Head Start has been on a roller coaster ride with funds being denied, reinstated, held up. So that creates a lot of insecurity. I'm really supporting, I'm supporting what you're saying. Oh, goodness. I'm sorry?
Kim online. Kim.
Oh, Kim. Oh, great. Kim Price. I was wondering who was online. Hi, Kim.
Hello. Yep, in Putney, we had our leadership council meeting. Just wanted to quick update on, because Putney's a community school. They've been doing some great things with that grant. They've started, they got some additional exercise equipment, and they've started doing class runs on Monday and Wednesday mornings in the gym, 25 minutes before class. So, that's become a very big community event at the school, with, teachers and students participating. They restarted the Lantern Supper this October, which had gone dormant for a number of years. So they've reinstituted that, and they were able to do a silent auction, and it was a fundraiser for the fifth graders' annual trip to Keewatin Environmental Education Center, which is a great week for the fifth graders. They're working to expand the playground. They're looking at putting in a composting toilet outside for the school sporting events and activities that happen outside. So that way there's availability for that for the community. And so, so the community schools grants, they've really been working hard, and they've got a great committee and a chairperson taking care of that, and putting together great programs for this year.
Wow, really good news. Anything else on Leadership Council updates? Okay, moving on. Board subcommittees? All right, moving on. We are up to consent agenda.
No SU update?
Okay, any SU updates? Not to my knowledge, no. Consent agenda. Approval of the minutes for November 13, 2025 and December 9, 2025. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Well, no, sorry. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Any unfinished business? And any new business? With that in mind.
Madam Chair, being there no business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Can I hear a second? All right. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned at 8:49 this evening. Thank you very much.